You are the salt of the earth. That's a wonderful old expression. It's the only rock that I know of anyway that's mined from the earth and it's ground up and that we eat, and it does so much for us. Salt. Salt historically has shaped civilization in powerful ways. We can't relate to that in the same way because if you're like me, I have to kind of limit this a little bit with what I put on my food because Doc says it does things to your blood pressure that it's not supposed to, that's not necessarily good for you. But neither is no salt. No salt means no health. No salt means things are flavorless. No salt means life is pretty bland and pretty boring. So historically, salt was used as currency some centuries ago. Major trade routes along the world were set up of where the salt was and where it needed to go. And so people would travel by horses and camels and by foot in the Middle East many centuries ago. In Jesus' times, when he's speaking about salt, he's speaking about something very precious. More precious than an IRA or a deed to a house or a bank account that is full. Far more precious. Salt has, issues over salt have started wars between countries. They have literally financed armies when it is sold for cash to finance the funds of governments. Revolutions have begun because somebody had some salt and somebody else didn't, and they wouldn't share. That's why we work on relationships with our brothers and sisters, right? When we're mad at them in the morning, we figure out how to do it. We figure out how to deal with it. Wars were won or lost because you did not have salt. The word salary itself originally comes from the Latin having to do with paying a soldier so he has a little bit of money to buy his salt for his food. Salary. You've heard the expressions, he's not worth one salt, or as we began this morning, you are the salt of the earth. It conjures up an image of spice, of tastiness, of vigor. This was a new one for me, to be above or below the salt, depending on your rank in the room that you're sitting at a table. You're above the salt if you're at a certain part of the table. You're below the salt if you're at the other end of the table. Taking something, somebody's word with a grain of salt. A little different way to look at it. When I was a kid in Wisconsin on my grandfather's farm, we cousins used to go out and play in the cow pasture. And dodging the cow pies, there would be some blocks of salt out there. And I am living proof that there are miracles because all of us cousins used to lick that salt block right there next to the cows. And I don't think anybody got cholera or I don't know any other things that you would think you'd get. It doesn't sound too appetizing this morning at all, but it is true. And that's how we know there are miracles. Oh, you remember, I think in the 70s and 80s, the SALT agreement, the SALT treaty, the strategic arms limitations talks. Strategic arms limitation talks, the SALT talks, historically. Salt is a way to preserve and cure fish and meat. You remember when intern Eder was here? And we had a churrasco and we rolled big hunks of meat in thick salt, layering it all the way around it. And we cooked it on the grill over the open fire nice and slowly. And we knocked off the salt, which had permeated the meat and locked in the juices. At the same time, it spiced it just right. It was absolutely delicious. It makes me hungry to think about it, even in the morning. Up until just a century ago, salt was hard to get. For our forefathers and mothers, when they came to America, salt was a very precious commodity and needed as they took off across the prairies. So since before Jesus' time and up until now, it's the difference between life and death. For if you have no salt, you will not be healthy. Today, this week, you probably saw it too, the huge piles of salt as the TV cameras were going down to the salt supplies in the cities as they're going like this every week. And everybody's wondering if we're going to have enough to make it till spring because we're running low on salt. Salt on the road means safety. Salt on the sidewalk crunches under your feet as you came in here this morning, as it did under mine, thank goodness, because there's no ice to slip on. Everywhere around us there is salt. And it helps me, and I trust that it can help you this morning to put Jesus' metaphor that salt means a lot. That if you contrast in our day and age, that salt was something that's not short in our supplies. But historically, that was in short supply. In fact, if you understand it that way, how precious it was that salt is tied, as it was in the Bible, to being the light of the world, there's the connection for us. Salt is everything. It does matter. When Jesus says, you are the salt of the earth, it matters. It makes all the difference. So if you think of all the ways that salt has value, as I'm sharing with you this morning, historically, up to this very day, your worth and my worth is a great deal. Salt does not lose its taste. It is only useless when it is not used, when it stays in the bottle, instead of sprinkling a little bit on our food, which makes it wonderful. A pretzel with no salt is pretty boring. A saltine cracker with no salt is pretty boring. A pizza without a little bit of salt on there is no good. You are the salt of the earth, you and me. So we are asked and we are meant this morning, as we understand our worth and our value, to get out of the salt shaker, to be sprinkled amongst the people that we live in and the lives that we're given here and now. Not far away, not some other day, but today as God's people, here and now. To get out of the shaker, to pull it up out of the salt bag and get spread around, to be loaded up on the trucks and spread for all to see. You are the light of the world because you are salt, because you have great value. Salt preserves, it heals, it brings life at its very best. It brings safety, and it just tastes really good. So the teachings of Jesus this morning help us understand who we are, salt of the earth, what you are, salt of the earth, and why you are here, to be salt of the earth, to be spread around, to be sprinkled about in the right proportions, not too much, not too little, just right, to bring the ways of God to our world. This is our joy and our delivery today. Go out and shake yourself around a little bit this morning. You are the salt of the earth. Amen.
This guy transferred from Pandora, Cupid dangled